welcome to Excuse My ADHD, a podcast for adults with or who think they may have ADHD. I'm your host, Jeanette, and this is my journey. Hello, and welcome to Excuse My ADHD. My name is Jeanette Graham. I am your host, and today I am interviewing Luz Jaramillo. She also has ADHD, dyslexia, and learning disabilities. She has struggled from an eating disorder and being overweight for over 36 years. She has over 20 years of experience as a master social worker, certified brain health coach, certified life coach, and master neuro-linguistic programming. She's also studied neuroplasticity, eating disorder awareness, stress management, as well as mindfulness. Luz is also certified as a metabolic health and fitness coach. She's a best-selling author and motivational speaker, and she's created a holistic coaching company called Brain Body Coach, Inc. that uses cognitive, science-based techniques to help individuals who are dealing with emotional binge eating, stress, and low self-esteem to promote a healthy lifestyle so they can lead a happy, healthy, fulfilling, prosperous life. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming to speak with me today. I really appreciate it. So tell me a little bit, as I was reading through your bio, the neuro-linguistic programming kind of stuck out a little bit, and I went and Googled it, and it was really interesting. So can you explain a little bit more about that and how it helps you with your coaching and helping people with ADHD and their eating disorders? Because I know for people with ADHD, not always everything that works for other people works for us. And I think that's part of what I read on the neuro-linguistic program is that it's taking what works for other people. So can you explain kind of how that works for you?
So thank you first for having me here today. And what I was interested about neuro-linguistic programming is because it really works your neurology, your language, and your functions. So the neuro is pretty much the component of your mental and your emotional part of who you really are. And the language is how you communicate not only with others, but most importantly to yourself. And that part was really one of my wow moments because of my entire life. I was really the worst best friend to myself. I was always criticizing, and so I knew how important it is to communicate with me. And the programming is how we function, how our internal system program the past experience towards the emotions, and all it can affect every single area in our lives. So it sounds kind of like a fascinated, and I went through deeply, and you definitely can discover so many things with a coach or on your own through neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah, that sounds like it. You talk about the emotional piece of it. And I think so many of us, that's what, at least for me, I think that's what the binge eating is tied to is my emotions and my stress and, also the impulsivity. And when all of that comes together along with my past experiences, I think that's exactly what that is. You kind of have to reprogram that.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It is. You definitely, through the time, even before we get out of the belly, we had a program through repetitions to beliefs to different ways of environmental as well. So as soon as we getting older, those become truly stuck in our conscious and subconscious mind, right? So what we do is to work little by little to eliminate the part that it doesn't really work and strengthen the part that is our, let's say, superpower. So that really, really helped me to understand that not only with ADD, but any person can absolutely benefit from this, but especially for us that we have the emotional dysregulation, that is the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a hard time with that myself. And it's really a struggle sometimes with the emotional dysregulation, and especially as a woman with hormone fluctuations and, everything like that. And so that kind of brings me to, I guess, the next thing when we're talking about all of the emotions and then getting to the hormones. You had said that you had had trouble with binge eating as an adolescent.
Yes.
So that was when you first noticed it, right? Or
I
did you
think
feel
everything
like you had
started
trouble before that?
from the beginning. If I think about it, the time that I started, I will say it's schooling time. When I was in elementary, anytime I have a clear clue between homework and food. Like for me, it was really, really, really hard. I struggled all my life with schooling. I think I remember I was trying to learn a test and asked me 5 minutes later, I totally forgot what I learned. And, and it was really, really hard. So my emotions, since I didn't know how to deal with them, food was my best friend. And I always had, especially sugar. I can't have bread. I can't have any other foods. But sugar was my biggest compulsion. So it was related. So pretty much I would say it started from 10, 12 years old, the most.
Yeah, I think with the sugar, I can absolutely relate to that. It's almost, and it's like a need, like you have to have it. Like I could try and be like, okay, my brain is telling me I don't need this right now and try and go to sleep. But then my body's like ejecting me from the bed down to the cabinet because I have to have it. And I can tell that it's usually like homework was always a struggle and getting ready for a test because you couldn't retain the information. And so then I think that leads to the emotional shame and the feelings of letting yourself and everyone else down. So then that's your coping mechanism.
It was my best friend.
Yeah.
All over. Like my best friend as when I was happy, when I was sad, when I was miserable, when I broke up with my boyfriend, in any moment of my life, that was pretty much always there. But my worst enemy, because I hated it so much. I was absolutely obsessive. I don't remember a day in my entire life that I wasn't looking at my body and I hated it and I wanted to change it. And I was always overweight, 50, 60 pounds. So it was really, really hard for me to kind of like fight against something that I knew that was my worst enemy.
Yeah. And do you feel like it got worse as you got through puberty?
It got worse. I will say the being a teenager, and I think this is an important message for especially that's the worst generations, because you get obsessive with others. When you are an adult, you suffer eating, but it's because of you. When you are a teenager, you suffer because you care more about what other people think about you than anybody else. So that was the worst time because everybody wants to do diets and they were able to do diets. I couldn't do a diet. I break it up the same day right away. Or maximum, I will say 3 days, but again and again. So it was really harder. I will see most of the people that I work with or the others, they have like anorexia, usually have troubles with hormones in terms of stop the bleed, the menstrual cycle and so on. People with binge eating, you don't get as much, or as far as I studied and noticed from others that I've been working with, your hormones are completely, of course, messed up. So you don't understand the signal, the leptin who is telling you, or the ghrelin that is telling you when you're full or when you're hungry, when you should stop. I never pay attention to that. And I guess with the executive function is much worse because your impulse control, you right away, you take an action and you don't think it twice, you just eat and that's it. You just feel the impulse and you don't think it twice. Oh, I should stop. No, you just do it. We don't pay attention.
Yep. Yes, exactly. And I think for me though, I kind of had opposite from you. In high school, I was anorexic and very to the T. I would go all day and not eat. But then when I got home, it was the junk food that I wanted. And I would eat a bag of Doritos. I would eat 2 bowls of ice cream, one before dinner, one after dinner. And then the whole next day I wouldn't eat all day long. So I was doing like this intermittent fasting to keep my weight down and to dangerous levels. I mean, I think at one point I was so thin. I mean, I look back at my senior pictures and my bones are sticking out everywhere. It wasn't healthy. And I don't know what happened or when the switch flipped, but I would say probably sometime before I had my son, it got worse. And I think I want to say that I feel like it was related more to my stress level as I got more responsibilities, as my stress increased. It went from that control all day to the eating all day to having to have cookies and candy bars and ice cream and cake all the time. And it was, even now I have a hard time where I feel like at night, I do a lot of work at night because, especially now with the coronavirus during the day, I try and spend with my kids. So at night between like 10 and 1 o'clock, I'm working, but then it's like, I'm getting up and I'm going and I'm getting Pop-Tarts and I'm going and I'm getting cake and ice cream or whatever, because eating that makes me feel better about what I'm doing.
But you know what it is? Because the dopamines are always usually low. Mm-hmm. And those kind of food increase the dopamine to a highest level. So the more we eat them, the more pleasure we feel. And our brains are used to just help you and give you pleasure instead of pain, avoids pain. So even though what they look is from the past years, and remember these moments when you needed to feel certain emotions and you have the food, so it linked as a pleasure instead of something bad for you. So even though you've been trying mentally and emotionally and always consciously to avoid that kind of food, unconsciously, your brain is still telling you, go ahead, have it, because it's pleasure for you. So you need to be happy. You need to be comfortable. You need to be okay. So those are the links that we have to softly by little it worked in a way that you rewire your brain to have different actions.
Yeah. It's so, that was something I always struggled with, was why I could control it in high school, but I never could now. And I think I agree with you. It's like I've rewired it and it's flipped.
Yes. So the neurons work that they as soon as they fire together, it gets stronger. So we create a neural inside is really, really packed. It's strong that right now we need the work instead of doing it less until if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same thing with like at the time when you weren't eating, you lose it. So you didn't need it. You didn't feel the need as much as to eat. So it's pretty much the same thing. The less you eat certain type of food, for example, you don't have the rewire of the need of having it more.
Yeah.
And having a connections between this is my pleasure, this is my happiness, to a connection, this is my pain, this is not good for me, is how you definitely can do the switch. That's a technique that is called the switch, for example, in neuro-linguistic programming, that you change from that moment, from the something really negative or something pleasant, that you want to change it for something is a habit, a behavior that you keep doing it, you can definitely switch that behavior toward whatever your desired behavior can be. So it's really fascinating.
That is fascinating because I've heard that too a lot of times from many different things about how the brain is always changing and learning, and that you can rewire it with different techniques like meditation or cognitive behavioral therapy. And it sounds like this neuro-linguistic program is similar, that it does change those neural pathways as well.
Absolutely, 100%. And one of the things that it was fascinating, I work for over 25 years with Alzheimer's and dementia, and that's the reason why I became crazy about the brain. And I wanted to find a solution. I really wanted to cure people with dementia. And I get so attached to them because I didn't know that I had ADD. I knew that I have a struggle at school, but I didn't have a title. I didn't have a diagnosis. That is what it makes you huge, a big problem for you, I think. At least it was for me. So at that time, it was a connection. I saw them desperate, trying to remember things. I wasn't to that point, but I say, I don't want to go there. So because I didn't know that it was dyslexia, learning difficulties, or ADD, what I had, I thought that sooner than later, I was going to have early onset Alzheimer's. So I was, oh my God, I'm not going to have this. And I worked so badly, and I saw those people suffering so bad, and their families and everybody around it, that I say, I'm going to find a solution just for me. And if I find a solution for me, I'll share it with the world. And that's how I find out that I have ADD. And it's like, okay, makes sense. Like, it was like a aha moment of happiness, but an aha moment of, oh, now what? Now worse.
I know. So I know I was diagnosed 3 years ago, and I went through this whole grieving process
Horrible.
when I got diagnosed. Did you have anything similar to that?
It was terrible. I cry. I did the brain health certificate from Dr. Daniel Amen. As I say, learning from Alzheimer's. When I find that out, it was a huge chapter just about the ADD. I cry, and my sister is a doctor. I call her crying and I say, why? I didn't know about this. I hated it because I would have done it when I was a child, not now that I'm 45 years old. Like, really? But in a way, it was, as I say, an aha moment that opened my mind. I was, okay, I'm not a normal. I'm like everybody else. And the more I learned and I started getting with the community, I realized, okay, maybe I'm not the worst. Maybe I'm okay. So it gave me a good sense of understanding that and learning that they're most of successful people. They have a, yes, that's absolutely fantastic. So I switched, even though I do have, it took me like a year or so. I went deep. I stopped writing. I stopped working. I stopped doing anything because I'm not capable. I have bad grammar. How I'm going to write something, a post on Instagram. And I'm bilingual, so my English is worse. My communication is worse. So I want, if before I had a low self-esteem, it went the worst. And the more I read about you have a family, like divorce is higher. Okay, I would start fighting with my husband, which I had been with him for 15, 17 years. I never had any issues with him. Sleeping, I never had a problem sleeping, but as more I knew, I started having a sleeping problem. So I guess sometimes the information is good depending of how our brain take it. So I did the switch. I changed it and I said, I'm not going to be like the bad, struggling, and anxious, depressed, and so on. I'm going to reverse this. If there's so many amazing people who has been doing it, I'm going to do whatever they do for myself to do the same. And it's so fun.
That is so great though. And I agree. And I feel like the people I've talked to, that's a very similar story, is that especially with those of us who have discovered it later in life, is that first we go through this whole, why didn't anybody tell me? Why didn't I know this? All the things I could have done differently, the anger and the sadness. We have to go through all of that processing so we can move forward. But then once we start moving forward, it just seems like a lot of people tend to do like what you did and switch what their purpose was to helping others like us.
Yes.
And helping ourselves in the process. And I just think that's such a wonderful thing. And I feel like it's almost like that's what our new purpose is that we need to help ourselves when we were younger and help other people realize it earlier so they don't have the same struggles that we did and go through some of those same things that we did. And I feel like that's, yeah. And I've seen that so many times now in talking to people. It's just so amazing to see such a common thread and common bond between all of us. So we're not alone.
No, not at all. No, it's been beautiful.
It has been. And I know I went to the National Conference on ADHD back in November. And that was my first time ever being around so many people with ADHD. And it felt like coming home. It was so wonderful.
Yeah, just to know that you're not a normal, that you're like everybody, a lot of other people. That's like a big happy moment, at least.
It is. It is. It so much is. But to get back to it, so when you were talking about the binge eating, and that's what the whole thing is that we're trying to talk about. So, ADHD tangents, but I did read that eating disorders constitute the third most common chronic illness among females during adolescence, and that girls are 4 times more likely to have an eating disorder than those without ADHD. Does that surprise you at all?
I think that was make it the worst when I knew that I had ADD. And it makes so much sense, totally. I did did the search. I went all over books, and I was surprised with all of the results. And it didn't surprise me though, because now that you understand the executive functions and knowing that that's our weakness part, planning, like when we plan, we really don't have a plan so far with meals. Generally, I'm talking about generally, not everybody, of course, but organization, we tend to have things all over. If we find a food or wherever in the kitchen, just grab it right away. So impulsivity. So there's so many lack of control and worriness. So when instead of feel like I'm sad, I'm depressed and bored, instead of understanding, okay, this is normal, we just grab food. So absolutely, I get it. And unfortunately, 30% of the people who has been obese, they're misdiagnosed with ADD. So there's so many people, I'm sure, aware that have issues with food that they don't know that they have ADHD.
I found the same 30% number of people incarcerated have ADHD, undiagnosed, those incarcerated with drug addictions. And food addiction is just exactly along those same lines. It's another form of coping and using a coping mechanism that obviously isn't working, but because you're misdiagnosed or undiagnosed for so long, that's all you know, and that's what you go to, and that's how you survive. So that doesn't surprise me at all that you said 30%. I just think it's kind of funny that that's the same number of those incarcerated. So it's, if you add those two together, I mean, there is going to be some overlap, give or take, say that equals 40%, 50% of the population of those people that are incarcerated. I mean, that's a lot.
One of the things that it made me to feel more compassion, and I guess for the bad one, let's put it that way, people who are in jail, people who had even child abuse and things like that sexually, when they do diagnose them, most of them, they have it is because it's misdiagnosed. And they show, like when learning about the sugar fact, for example, exactly the same in the brain when you have drugs like cocaine, because exactly the same thing. They showed a scan, and the brain, it acts exactly the same when you have cocaine and when you have sugar in your body. So it is absolutely addicted, and it definitely, you have less activity function, so you cannot have a good rationalization, a good action. So in a way, that's when the people say, oh, forget about the sugar, it does have an impact. And I want to specify, not everybody has the same sensitivity level,
right?
But I can talk to friends who has ADD, who they just need to improve the functions, and other people who definitely have a highest levels of sensitivity with certain food. That doesn't mean I'm not 100, I'm 3,000. I am like the highest toward sugar, especially. Carbs, I understand that is pretty much the same, but I don't have the same impact when I eat certain foods.
Right.
And now I too listen to my body. I do listen to my body, and I understand the impact.
Yeah, I think I found the same thing. It's so I could tell a significant difference. It's about 2 years ago, and I'm trying to recreate the whole thing now. But about 2 years ago, I got on a big weight loss kick when I first started the medication. And for the starting Wellbutrin, I was able to make better choices. So whatever the Wellbutrin does for binge eating, it helped me lose 30 pounds because I didn't have that constant need and desire to eat the sugar. I could actually go and eat the foods I needed to be eating to help my executive functions and to help make my body healthy. So instead of, going straight to the fast food or the quick thing, because, like you said, I mean, it's hard to meal plan. It's hard to prepare lunches ahead of time and meals ahead of time. It takes a lot of executive function to do that. But with that compulsion there, it makes it like 100 times harder. And so without that, I may not have been able to meal plan as much, but I could go to the store on my lunch because it was right around the corner And instead of just picking like just the quickest unhealthy thing, I would go through and be like, okay, you know what? This salad sounds really good. So I'll get some spinach and some this and some that, throw it together real quick and eat it and feel much better about myself. And after a couple of weeks of that, I started feeling my executive functions come back. Like I started having more focus. And even though I was on the medication and that was helping as well, I did still feel a significant difference between when I first started the medication to when I was still eating the junk food to when I was able to start eating better, which also helped me to start exercising more. And all of that just snowballed. And eventually, over the course of 6 months, I had lost 30 pounds, 35 pounds. And then I don't know what happened, but I think it's the typical ADHD thing. You start doing really great on a habit, something happens, whether it's you get sick, a life event happens, and you get off that train, and it's so hard to get back on. And that's kind of what I'm struggling with now, is getting back on that train and recreating whatever it was I had then. But I had gotten to, I think when this whole thing started with the pandemic, I was like, oh, I'm going to take a break from my meds. And I did. And for the first month, looking back on it now, I didn't see it at the time, but I look back on it now that I'm back on my meds and I can see the decline.
Usually like 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not on medications.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely I'm trying to do everything holistically, but I am always, and I want to clarify this, everybody is absolutely different. What it works
exactly.
for you with your medicine, it won't work for anybody else. Doesn't mean that if you take this medicine specifically, you're going to lose 30 pounds right away.
Oh, no, I need to clarify that. I'm exactly not saying that.
Well, that would be fantastic. Let me say that right away just in case. But just also the same thing for me. I don't take any medication, and I do learn what will help me to increase my function, like my executive function, and to be more alert, oriented, like more on earth, right? And it really, as soon as you have your why is so important for you, then you really have that motivation, because we don't have the motivation. The motivation pretty much work with the head.
And I think, I guess to clarify, I think that's what was with the Wellbutrin, what was helping, because one, Wellbutrin is also used for depression. I did a genetic study. I can't take regular depression medication because my body metabolizes it too quickly. And so by no means, I know you saying that makes me just want to clarify it for people, because I don't want anybody to think that that's what I was doing, or to go down that road, or think that I'm condoning that. But I think what the Wellbutrin did was it helped me, one, to get out of that depression fog,
which is important.
Exactly. And two, to, I guess, help me clear that compulsion, because I have a whole host of things. And like you said, everybody is going to be so different, and everything is going to work different for people. And I think part of what the reason is because ADHD is more like a spectrum, and it all depends on your comorbidities and your life experiences as to how much that's going to affect you and how severe your symptoms are going to be. So like I've said before, I have OCD and ADHD, which they butt heads, and then the PTSD and depression and anxiety. So I have, mine's very complex, but at the same time, having that catalyst to give me, I guess, a leg up to where I could take control of what I was doing. Because by no means was I depending on that for my weight loss. I was working out, I was running, I was doing yoga, but it helped me it helped my brain to be able to make the better choices without that monster gnawing at it, I guess. Absolutely. Is the best way to put it. I think that's maybe a better way to put it, because that monster of needing the sugar and having to have the sugar and compulsively needing it to the point where if there was none in the house, I was going crazy. So without that gnawing at me, I was able to make the better decisions. I wasn't looking for a quick fix. I was looking to get healthier because I felt horrible. I was tired all the time. I was, I wasn't able to, I was always, and I was finally waking up. I was eating the foods that were giving me the energy that I needed for my brain to work correctly. And that the exercise was creating the dopamine the right way. And
removing the stress.
It was removing the stress, and all of those things were working together in unison to rewire my brain. Mm-hmm. And that's what I miss. Don't care about the weight so much as that clarity and the feelings of being that healthy inside.
When you say that, exactly is that when you have that, let's say, the soul inside of you, the happiness, the joy, everything else comes automatically itself. Mm-hmm. I remember when I struggled the worst with my compulsion, I was reading book for ADD, for eating disorders. And I was trying to find a solution. And I think I read like 7,000 books. Literally, I do have a copy of every single one because I write it down. And learning from them, I was literally having an ice cream, a gallon of ice cream with those brownies from Costco that it comes a full package. Mm-hmm. So learning from how to heal from eating disorder, eating at the same time, and then crying. Mm-hmm. So it was like the button of my compulsion. When I woke up, like I say, enough. Like I was really surrendering and screaming, if enough, I cannot keep doing this anymore. And I think that was the day, exactly maybe 5 years ago, when I say that's it. And no, that is enough, because I've been saying that's it for 36 years and it never worked. But I think that was really the button of my compulsion. Like that was the worst moment ever that I say, that's it, I need to change. And I think put together all of the knowledge and all of the practices, because I think we know so much, but we don't practice. So I was trying to put, okay, if it work for you, tell me what it works for you, and I'm going to do it. So that's exactly what I did. I had my own system of taking from here, taking from here, taking from here, what it really worked the most. And it's 5 years with the happiness of feeling I overeat sometimes, but I don't binge, which is a huge difference.
And I almost feel like too is we have to allow ourselves a little bit of that without without shaming ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it too, is we have
to. Shame and guilt is been proven in the brain that is exactly the same as if you eat a gallon of sugar. It works the same. So it causes the stress mode. And let's see, when you are overweight, usually is your limbic system, the most important one, that is an alert. We're always in constant fight and flight. So when we eat certain foods that are not supposed to be okay for us, for your own body, it causes stress. So the stress gives the cortisol, and the cortisol gives the overweight, and the insulin, the glucose. So it's a circle. So the more you do that, the more it's going to be stress, the more stress. So it's really going like that. So when you learn to understand this food gives me the same stress or guilt and shame, is going to be the same as if you're kind of allowed to give certain permission, and with quiet tranquility, quiet happiness, that I'm allowing it, I'm planning it, I'm okay, and it works. I have a client that she eats absolutely everything, and she has lost 65 pounds just because she learned how to handle it and giving herself the permission without any stress. And
I think that's huge. That's huge, because so many of the diets you see are about restricting everything so much. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great for people that can do that. But I can't do that. I know I can't do that because I put too much pressure on myself and feel too much shame and too much guilt if I get off track even a little bit. And then I fail at it. And then I'm like, I can't do this. And I do know that, like, when I had started that journey before, it was slow, and I was still allowing myself to eat nachos with cheese and to eat, junk food. But I was minimizing how much I was eating, trying to portion it and stay within a certain number of calories, and trying to balance it and shift the bad to the good slowly. And that seemed to be the best for me. What are some of the tools that you found for yourself were the best when you first started your journey?
One I have a lot of good ones. One of the best is to really listen when I'm talking. What are the triggers? Like when you listen and learn about the habit loop, there is always a cue. So what is my cue? Like for me, homework was my cue. And let's see, as soon as I was going home, kitchen is my cue. Like anything related with the kitchen was my cue. Having a snacks, it was my cue. So I had a whole of them. So identify where were my cues, right? Then my trigger, I know that if I'm sad, unhappy, and upset, that was my trigger to the cue to right away look for the food. And the action is right away without even thinking, just go ahead and do it. So I did, first of all, eliminate, even though, like, of course, for me being home is excellent that I don't have to go to the supermarket and buy the food. But right now, I can literally, for the past 5 years, I can have all of the sweets that you want on top of my table and see them, and it doesn't give me, I change it from, instead of, oh my God, I have to have it. It's not a restriction. So I don't restrict myself anymore. I learned that it's not good for me. So my body reacts to it instead of being like, oh my God, it's good. Or like a child with a peanut butter allergy. They don't like, I have to have it. They literally learn itself that they cannot have the peanut butter. So they survive without living with the peanut butter. That's exactly for me. I learned I cannot have sweets. So I survive. I have my pizza Fridays with my kids or weekends. That's not my problem. You know what I'm saying? But certain food, no. So understand the clue, understand what is the trigger. We normally had an impression, and that's something that I really want to tell everybody. Yes, emotions are important. Yes, we all have dysregulation. Yes, we do. And trauma, we don't really need to solve our problems, and we don't really need to solve the emotions in order for us to count emotional eating or binge eating. And that was one of the things, oh my God, I have to be perfect. I have to cure all my past, my traumas. You definitely don't. If you learn certain techniques of how to deal, I have the food in front of me right now, just change and understand that is a voice talking to you. For me, sugar is extreme. For me, sugar used to call me many, many, many times and was saying, eat me, you have to eat me. And I have a few other people that laugh at me anytime I say that because they don't understand when I say that. For others, it's like, you're talking about this is just really crazy. But it's true. And it's for understanding that voice is not my voice. So I learned to separate that voice. And so other is the mindfulness. Mindfulness has been an amazing tool because I'm on earth. I've left my past. I let my, whatever is going to happen in the future. But our thoughts creates really, whatever you focus expands. So the more, like you say, I cannot have sugar. I really cannot have sugar. I am not going to have sugar today. You're telling your brain, go get a sugar. Because your brain doesn't understand the difference between yes or no. Their job is survival, like that. Nothing else. Nothing else is supposed to do. So if you say no sugar, that means go get me sugar. So it's your language, just to understand. When you say so much, I have ADD, so that's the reason why I'm crazy. So that's the reason why I'm so unfocused. That's the reason why I'm so disorganized. It's the title. You keep the title to it. It's your identity. Is to learn that you can change that identity with who you really want to be. So I changed my words. I'm more conscious. When I look at the mirror that I hated for 36 years, now I literally for the first time to say, I love my body. I truly love my body. So it's changed those words. I couldn't say 35 years, I love my body if I hated it. How am I going to say that? Like I was really lying to myself. So, but it's to work into your words that at least they're not as a positive affirmation only. No, but neutral affirmation. Mm-hmm. So if you cannot say something good about you, don't say at least bad things about you. Neutral, something that it doesn't give you black or white or just so a specific perfectionist, because we tend to be really extreme one way or the other.
And we're our own worst critic.
Exactly. Pay a little. It takes time. It takes job. I still criticize, but I kind of like be able to stop and I say no, like, hello, no. When I struggle, when I have difficulty planning organization, creating so many things, I stop. It's just those little things. We are creating the neural connections and it make it huge, and we're separating the things that are not as much. Those are really one of the good ones. I have many others, but
I'll have to get a list from you and I can post it for
anytime.
people.
Sure.
So are there any things that you tried that just absolutely did not work for you?
Yes, diet, restriction, absolutely. And all for everyone. The more, it's so simple as, the funny thing is when I really let it go, like I say, enough with my body, I don't care enough about you, I'm going to be fat for the rest of my life. When I gave up, let it go, it makes you like lost pounds easily. But it is dieting restriction. It doesn't work. It doesn't really work. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely, and it's been in studies proven, everything. People who has eating disorder, struggling with food, overweight, all of that is mainly because you restrain the most important food. You have to have carbs. You have to have good fats, especially good fats and proteins. Those are the ones that give you energy. If you are lousy, if you have no energy in the morning, if you wake up without feeling, we have to do reverse. In order for us not to be depressed, we wait to be home. Normally, the way you eat, when you exercise, is when you get out of the depression. And we need to get out of the depression to start eating better and to start exercising. Those are the medicine. First, do them, even though it's harder. And don't rely in willpower or motivation on all of them because they're not working. But at least into the fact that change the title and naming yourself, I'm an addicted, or I cannot stop. The more you're saying I cannot stop eating that specific food, you're not going to stop. That's a guarantee.
So I feel like forgiveness is a big thing too. Self-forgiveness.
Absolutely amazing.
I can't tell how many times I've fallen off the wagon when trying to manage my eating. And I can imagine you've probably had the same problems. When you struggle with impulses to binge eat now, if you do struggle with them, how do you get yourself back on track?
I don't binge anymore for the past, I say, 5 years, but I do have overeating, and I do have a limit that I put to myself. Like, let's see, my weight is, as I say, always was 165, 60 something, and I came now to 115 to 120. So instead of going to the weighing myself, I don't do that anymore, and I don't count calories. I don't do absolutely any of that stupidity because truly doesn't really work. But I'm more conscious of when I am allowing certain things more. Let's say, for example, at the beginning of the virus, because we were ordering food for outside, my husband was bringing the food. He says that they were available, everything. So I was allowing myself to eat more crappy food because it wasn't available. Yeah. And so I ate everything like that. He was bread, and I was so excited eating a lot of bread. You can see the difference right away. So I'm conscious enough, like I have a certain limit. So I was eating extras. So I call it, and one of the things that I learned from a coach, it was, this says, when you have a husband, and if you don't say, I'm going to cheat a little bit of my husband today, I'm just going to kiss somebody else, but it's a little bit, I'm just going to allow myself. And I was doing that with the sweets, with sugar. You don't allow that. If you have a husband who loves and respects, you don't cheat a little bit, or you cheat and you don't. So it's exactly the same thing, is to understand, if I do have a problem, there's some food, there's some like nutrition, healthy coconut brownie that I made and doesn't give me any over extra eating. It's different, but it's just to learn and to awareness is absolutely the key. I think every coach in every executive functions, the more that they focus on is awareness. It's practicing. And their classes for free. If people cannot pay a coach, go online, check, it's everywhere.
I've heard that too, how many times that mindfulness and awareness are some of your biggest tools, whether it's with the binge eating or exercising or anything else with ADHD, it's being mindful of what you're doing so you can correct it. Because if you're not mindful that you're doing it, you don't know that you're doing it, and you're not correcting anything and you're not changing anything. So this has been really wonderful. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on. And just to close out, what is your number one piece of advice for anyone who is trying to figure out a way to get their binge eating under control? Is it to, whether it's to go to a doctor or to start reading, what is your number one piece of advice that you give your clients?
First of all, even though I say awareness, yes, it is because sometimes we misdiagnosed or we overeat, right? Just being aware if that's really overeating, if that is really, I have a trigger with a specific food, just listening to the body, listen to the body. And maybe it's like me that I never felt hungry before. I always feel hungry and I never felt full. If you feel all of those sensations that you cannot understand, at least for one meal, to listen to your body and see, okay, I cannot control that food. It is maybe a sign that you do have problems with food. So the best way is really, there's so many good books, there's so many good documentation, I can give them to them, or really ask for help. I went to many professionals before, but they did. The biggest advantage now with coaches is that they had it before, so they learn from the experience. And I went to many professional psychiatrists. They don't understand what is depression because they never had depression. Yeah. They never know what is a chocolate talking to you. So simple things like that is, if we are connected, we understand each other because we had the same emotions, we have the same feelings, right? It is that. Find for help for people who understand what you're talking about, or really look, there's so many books, but practice at least one thing of all of them. One thing. Make a commitment one day. Anything that I think is important and I can do it, just practice. It's small progress. It changes your neurons connection and it absolutely rewired your brain.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luz. I am going to get some of those books from you and put them on the website. I am also going to, in the show notes, put your website, because I know you're a coach. So anyone that's listening can reach out to you, hopefully, and get some wonderful advice and help if they need it. And just thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for this topic, because I know that a lot of people are struggling and they're quiet and they don't communicate about this.
Exactly. So until next time, this is Excuse My ADHD, and I will see you guys soon. Thank you for listening to Excuse My ADHD. If you like what you hear, don't forget to please subscribe, rate, and leave an awesome review. Show notes and social media links are available at www.excusemyadhd.com. Until next time.